Welcome. If you are listening to this, it means your mind is looking for a place to rest. Close your eyes, let go of the weight of the day, and let yourself drift. Tonight, we escape the noise of the modern world entirely. We are traveling to the coordinates of absolute quiet. A place where the clock does not matter, where deadlines do not exist, and where the planet speaks only in the slow, rhythmic language of shifting ice. We are going to the bottom of the map. We are going to Antarctica. Before we begin our journey into the deep ice, take a deep breath in and let it out. Imagine the air around you cooling down, becoming crisp, pure, and perfectly still. You are standing on the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf. It is a cliff of solid, ancient ice that rises dozens of meters above a dark, quiet ocean. The water below is so clear and so still that it reflects the pale gray sky like a flawless mirror. There are no cars here. There are no sirens. There are no footsteps. There is only the immense, heavy presence of the largest ice mass on Earth. For the next few hours, we will explore this frozen desert. We will descend through kilometers of solid ice to find hidden lakes that haven't seen sunlight in 15 million years. We will walk alongside the resilient, silent creatures that call this extreme landscape home. And we will witness the slow, monumental changes written into the very layers of the frost. Let your mind drift across the white plains. Let yourself sink into the snow. Antarctica is a land of massive, breathtaking contradictions. It is a continent entirely wrapped in ice, yet it is scientifically classified as the largest, driest desert on our planet. To understand this place, we must first look at its scale. It stretches across nearly 14 million square kilometers. That makes it twice the size of the continent of Australia and larger than the entire United States and Europe combined. And yet, across this unimaginable expanse of land, there is almost no liquid surface water. The air is so incredibly cold that it cannot hold moisture. The interior of the continent receives less than 50 millimeters of rainfall or snowfall each year. When snow does fall here, it does not arrive in heavy, wet storms. It falls as tiny, dry ice crystals, soft, powdery dust that floats through the air like frozen glitter. Because the temperature in the heart of the continent never rises above freezing, this icy dust has nowhere to go. It cannot melt. It cannot evaporate. Instead, it simply lands on the surface and stays there, layer after layer, century after century, millennium after millennium. The weight of the new snow gently presses down on the older snow beneath it. Over thousands of years, this pressure forces all the trapped air bubbles out of the deep layers, transforming the soft powder into dense, solid, heavy glacial ice. This process creates the Great Antarctic Ice Sheet, a giant, heavy dome of ice that smothers 98% of the continental bedrock. The scale of this ice sheet is difficult for the human mind to comprehend. On average, the ice is nearly 2 kilometers thick. In the interior regions, near the pole of inaccessibility, the ice plunges even deeper, reaching a staggering thickness of over 4.5 kilometers. The weight of this frozen mass is so unimaginably immense that it actually deforms the planet. The sheer gravity of 7 million cubic miles of ice has pushed the entire continent of Antarctica downward, crushing the solid bedrock deep into the Earth's mantle, far below the level of the surrounding sea. If you were to magically remove all the ice from Antarctica today, the landmass would slowly rise back up over thousands of years, returning to its natural shape like a giant sponge. This ice contains roughly 90% of all the ice on Earth, and nearly 70% of our planet's entire supply of fresh water. If it were all to melt at once, the oceans of the world would rise by 60 meters, swallowing coastlines across every globe. But out here, the deep interior, the ice feels permanent. It feels as solid and unyielding as the mountains beneath it. As we move inland, away from the flat coastal shelves, the landscape begins to rise. Cutting directly across the center of the continent are the Transantarctic Mountains. This is one of the longest mountain ranges on Earth, stretching for over 3,500 kilometers, cleanly dividing the land into East Antarctica and West Antarctica. Most of this mountain range is completely invisible to the human eye. It sits buried, suffocated beneath the kilometers-deep ice sheet. But the highest, sharpest peaks manage to fight their way through the heavy white crust. They pierce the sky like dark, jagged teeth, rising out of an endless ocean of frost. Geologists call these isolated, wind-swept peaks nunataks. The nunataks are a strange, otherworldly sight. Because the winds in these high altitudes are incredibly fierce, reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour, snow cannot settle on the rock faces. The wind blasts the stone clean, leaving the dark, bare rock exposed to the harsh polar sun. These rocks are ancient, made of layers of sandstone, dolerite, and granite that were formed hundreds of millions of years ago, during a time when Antarctica was positioned near the equator and covered in lush, green, subtropical rainforests. Now, they stand as silent, frozen monuments to the deep history of our shifting planet. But the true mystery of Antarctica does not lie on its surface. To find the most remarkable geography on the continent, we have to travel straight down, passing through kilometers of solid ice into the pitch-black world at the very bottom of the ice sheet. For decades, scientists believed that the ground beneath the ice sheet was a frozen, dead wasteland. But using advanced satellite radar and deep penetrating radio waves, they discovered something miraculous. The bottom of the ice sheet is alive with water. Today, glaciologists have mapped over 400 hidden liquid bodies of water known as subglacial lakes. The largest and most famous of these is Lake Vostok. It sits quietly in the heart of East Antarctica, directly beneath the Russian Vostok research station. To reach the surface of Lake Vostok, you would have to drill down through 4 kilometers of solid, heavy glacial ice. The lake itself is massive, roughly the size of Lake Ontario in North America. It is a deep, dark basin of liquid fresh water that has been completely sealed away from the atmosphere, the wind, and the sunlight for over 15 million years. You might wonder how a lake can remain liquid when it is buried under 4 kilometers of ice in the coldest place on Earth. The secret lies in a beautiful balance of planetary physics. First, the 4-kilometer thick blanket of ice acts as a massive insulator, trapping the natural geothermal heat that gently radiates upward from the deep interior of the Earth. Second, the sheer, crushing weight of the ice sheet creates immense pressure at the base. This extreme pressure lowers the melting point of water, allowing it to remain in a liquid state even when the temperature drops below 0 degrees. Because Lake Vostok has been isolated for millions of years, it represents one of the most extreme alien environments on our planet. It is a world of total, eternal darkness, subjected to crushing pressure and high concentrations of dissolved oxygen. Yet, when scientists carefully sampled the water at the very edge of the lake, they found life. Deep within the subglacial dark thrives a complex ecosystem of microscopic organisms. These are hardy, specialized bacteria and archaea that do not need sunlight to survive. They don't rely on photosynthesis. Instead, they derive their energy from chemosynthesis, slowly processing the minerals and nutrients trapped in the ancient bedrock and sediment at the bottom of the lake. It is a slow, quiet, invisible world of life, operating on a timeline of millions of years, completely independent of the world above. If we rise back up to the surface and travel outward toward the coastlines, The barren desert of the interior slowly gives way to the unique wildlife of the polar rim. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth with no native terrestrial mammals. There are no wolves, no bears, and no deer walking across these plains. The land is too harsh, and the food resources are too scarce. Instead, the true masters of the Antarctic land are the birds, and among them, none are more iconic or more resilient than the emperor penguin. The emperor penguin is the largest of all penguin species, standing over a meter tall and weighing up to 40 kilograms. While other animals flee the brutal Antarctic winter, the emperor penguin does the exact opposite. Instead, the true masters of the Antarctic land are the birds, and among them, none are more iconic or more resilient than the emperor penguin. The emperor penguin is the largest of all penguin species, standing over a meter tall and weighing up to 40 kilograms. While other animals flee the brutal Antarctic winter, the emperor penguin does the exact opposite. They march inland, away from the open water, to breed on the solid sea ice during the darkest, coldest months of the year. To survive winter temperatures that regularly drop below -60 degrees and winds that cut through the flesh like knives, the penguins rely on a beautiful, cooperative strategy. They form a giant, tightly packed huddle. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of penguins press their bodies close together, creating a massive shield of shared warmth. Inside the center of the huddle, the temperature can rise to a comfortable 24 degrees. The penguins understand the value of community. They do not fight for the warm spot in the center. Instead, they operate in a slow, continuous, rhythmic rotation. The penguins on the cold, wind-swept outer edge slowly work their way inward toward the heat, while the warm penguins in the center gently move outward to take their turn protecting the group. They move like a single, slow-breathing organism, quietly enduring the long polar night together. While the land belongs to the penguins, the surrounding southern ocean belongs to the giants of the deep. The waters circling Antarctica are some of the most biologically productive oceans on Earth, driven by a tiny, translucent creature called Antarctic krill. Krill are small, shrimp-like crustaceans, barely a few centimeters long. Yet, they are the vital engine that powers the entire polar ecosystem. They gather in massive swarms that can stretch for several kilometers, containing trillions of individual organisms. During the dark winter months, the krill seek refuge directly beneath the sea ice. They feed on the microscopic algae that grow on the underside of the frozen sheets, scraping it off with their tiny legs like miniature lawnmowers. In turn, these massive swarms of krill provide an endless harvest for fish, penguins, seabirds, and seals. The abundance of krill draws the largest predators on Earth to the Antarctic coastlines. Every summer, majestic humpback whales, minke whales, and blue whales migrate thousands of miles from the warm equator to feed in the nutrient-rich, icy currents of the Southern Ocean. A single blue whale can consume up to 4 tons of krill every single day. The sound of these whales surfacing in the quiet polar bays is a deeply peaceful experience. A loud, echoing whoosh breaks the silence as they exhale a column of mist into the cold air, before smoothly diving back down into the glassy black depths, leaving barely a ripple behind on the water's surface. Alongside the whales are the seals of Antarctica. 6 distinct species inhabit these ice fields, each perfectly adapted to the cold. There is the Weddell seal, which lives further south than any other mammal, using its strong teeth to grind breathing holes into the thick sea ice from below. And there is the leopard seal, a sleek, powerful, solitary predator with a spotted coat, moving through the underwater channels with effortless grace and speed. This is the delicate balance of the Antarctic fringe, a world where life does not fight against the environment, but integrates with it completely. The ice shapes the water feeds the krill sustain the giants, and the entire system moves in a slow, cyclical dance that has repeated for millions of seasons. As the sun begins to set over the horizon, casting long, deep purple and amber shadows across the snow plains, the continent enters a period of deep twilight. The stars break through the thin, crisp atmosphere, revealing a sky more clear and brilliant than anywhere else on Earth. And across the dark sky, the green and violet ribbons of the southern lights, the aurora australis, begin to dance, casting a soft, comforting glow over the silent, sleeping world of ice. As the twilight settles softly over the coastal rims, we turn our gaze away from the living creatures of the shoreline and move deeper into the physical mechanics of the ice itself. To truly understand Antarctica, we must understand that the ice is not a static, dead monument. It is a slow, living, breathing system. It is an ocean frozen in time, moving at a speed that the human eye can barely perceive, yet carrying a force that shapes the entire globe. Let your mind drift down into the crystalline structure of the glaciers. When you look closely at a block of ancient polar ice, it does not look like the ice you find in a regular freezer. It does not look clear, and it does not look white. Deep within the heart of a glacier, the ice glows with a rich, intense, breathtaking shade of sapphire blue. This deep blue color is a physical record of time. When snow first falls on the high polar plateau, it is light, fluffy, and filled with trapped air pockets. But as millions of tons of subsequent snowfalls press down on top of it over thousands of years, those tiny pockets of air are slowly crushed out of existence. The ice crystals are compressed closer and closer together until they fuse into a massive, uninterrupted solid structure. Because this dense ice lacks the tiny air bubbles that normally scatter light, it absorbs the longer red wavelengths of the sun's rays. The shorter blue light, however, is able to pass deeply through the ice, reflecting back out to create that surreal, glowing neon blue that illuminates the deep cracks and crevasses of the continent. If you look into a glacial crevasse, you are looking at light that has been trapped and filtered through snow that fell before human civilization even began. This massive ice sheet is divided into two distinct geological systems, separated cleanly by the Transantarctic Mountains, the East Antarctic Ice Sheet and the West Antarctic Ice Sheet. They are fundamentally different environments, behaving in vastly different ways, yet they are bound together by the same global climate cycle. The East Antarctic Ice Sheet is the older, larger, and far more stable sibling. It rests comfortably on a solid mass of bedrock that sits safely above sea level. Because the rock beneath it is high and dry, this ice sheet is incredibly thick, cold, and slow-moving. The temperatures in East Antarctica are the lowest ever recorded on Earth, dropping below -89 degrees. At these temperatures, the ice becomes as hard as tempered steel. It does not slide, it does not melt, and it responds to global climate changes on a scale of millions of years. It is the cold, unwavering heart of the planet. West Antarctica, however, tells a completely different story. Unlike the East, the West Antarctic Ice Sheet does not rest on a high continental plateau. Instead, it rests on a bed of rock that sits deep below the surface of the ocean. It is a marine-based ice sheet. This means that the outer edges of the ice are in direct, constant contact with the ocean water, making it far more sensitive, dynamic, and reactive to the subtle warming shifts of our global currents. To understand how global climate shifts affect this fragile marine ice sheet, we must look at the vital concept of ice shelves. Ice shelves are the great floating extensions of the land-based glaciers. As the heavy weight of the ice sheet pushes downward from the mountains, it forces the glaciers to slowly slide downhill toward the sea. When the glacier reaches the coast, It doesn't break off immediately. Instead, it pushes out over the surface of the dark ocean, floating on the salt water while remaining firmly attached to the ice on the land. These massive floating platforms act as the natural dams or buttresses of the continent. They are the gatekeepers. As long as a thick, solid ice shelf blocks the mouth of a bay, it holds back the massive glaciers behind it, slowing down their descent into the ocean like a giant stopper in a bottle. But over the past few decades, scientists tracking the health of our global climate have noticed a subtle, profound shift in the way these ice shelves behave. The air temperature above Antarctica remains intensely cold, but deep beneath the surface of the sea, the hidden ocean currents are beginning to warm. When warmer water from the deep Pacific and Atlantic Oceans circulates toward the South Pole, it slips quietly beneath the floating ice shelves. It targets the grounding line, the exact hidden point where the floating ice leaves the bedrock and begins to drift on the water. As the slightly warmer salt water laps against this vulnerable route, it slowly, invisibly melts the ice shelf from the bottom up. When an ice shelf loses its thickness from below, it loses its structural strength. The stress lines begin to crack, and massive blocks of ice break away in a natural process known as calving. This is how the largest icebergs on Earth are born. These are not the small, jagged ice rocks you see in the North Atlantic. These are tabular icebergs, vast, flat-topped islands of ice that can be the size of entire cities, or even small countries, drifting slowly out into the open sea until they melt into the global current. When an ice shelf collapses completely, the giant stopper is pulled out of the bottle. Without the structural resistance of the shelf, the glaciers sitting on the land behind it begin to speed up. They slide toward the ocean up to 3 or 4 times faster than they used to, dumping billions of tons of fresh water into the sea and contributing directly to the slow, steady rise of global sea levels. This dynamic is most evident in West Antarctica's Pine Island and Thwaites glaciers. Thwaites Glacier, often referred to by scientists as the Doomsday Glacier, is roughly the size of the state of Florida or the country of Great Britain. It is currently one of the fastest changing glaciers on the continent, acting as a massive drainage basin for the West Antarctic ice sheet. The ice inside Thwaites Glacier is shifting, its grounding line retreating backward into deeper underwater valleys every single year. Because the bedrock beneath Thwaites slopes downward as you move inland, the further the glacier retreats, the thicker the ice face becomes, and the faster it can potentially collapse. It is a slow-motion geographical event that holds the key to the future coastlines of New York, London, Tokyo, and Mumbai. But this process is not in chaotic, violent destruction. In the world of sleep and nature, we look at this as a grand, slow transformation, a shifting of states from solid to liquid, an ancient cyclical dance where the Earth adjusts its temperature, weight, and balance across centuries. As we look deeper into the melting mechanics, we find another hidden geographical wonder: the creation of subglacial rivers. Just as there are hidden lakes sealed miles below the ice, there are also massive, pitch-black river networks flowing through the dark tunnels between the ice sheet and the bedrock. These rivers are formed by frictional heat as the giant ice sheet rubs against the stone floor, mixed with the geothermal warmth rising from the Earth's crust. They flow under immense pressure, carving smooth, winding highways through the mud and rock. These dark rivers act as natural lubrication systems, allowing the heavy glaciers above them to slide more smoothly across the continent. Eventually, these subglacial rivers empty out into the ocean beneath the floating ice shelves. As the fresh, cold river water mixes with the salty ocean water, it creates a unique upwelling effect. The fresh water is less dense than the salt water, so it rushes upward toward the surface, bringing vital nutrients, minerals, and iron deposits up from the deep continental bedrock. This nutrient-rich upwelling acts as a massive fertilizer for the Southern Ocean. It feeds the microscopic phytoplankton, which feed the massive swarms of krill, which ultimately feed the majestic whales we spoke of earlier. Even in its melting, even in its slow retreat, the ice provides life to the rest of the planet. It is an intricate, beautifully woven web where geography, physics, and biology match perfectly. Every change that happens at the bottom of the map ripples outward to affect the rest of the world. The massive white expanse of Antarctica acts as the planet's primary air conditioning unit. Because the ice sheet is a pristine, unbroken white mirror, it possesses a high albedo effect. This means it reflects up to 85% of the sun's incoming solar radiation back out into deep space, protecting the Earth from overheating. As the ice patterns shift and the dark ocean water is exposed, the planet absorbs more heat, driving the global weather patterns, wind currents, and rain cycles that sustain agriculture from the plains of North America to the rice fields of Asia. Antarctica may feel isolated, miles away from human touch, but every single breath of wind and drop of rain on Earth is connected to this frozen plain. Now, we lift our gaze from the southern edge of the Earth and travel north. We cross the great blue expanse of the global oceans, flying over the warm, humming equator, until we reach the highest northern latitudes of our planet. We are entering the Arctic Circle. To understand the geography of the world, we must understand that the North Pole and the South Pole are complete, beautiful opposites. While Antarctica is a massive, solid rock continent surrounded entirely by a wild ocean, the Arctic is the exact inverse. It is a deep, vast ocean surrounded entirely by land, wrapped in by the northern coastlines of Russia, Canada, Greenland, Scandinavia, and Alaska. At the absolute center of this northern world, there is no solid ground. There are no buried mountain ranges or rock formations. If you were to stand exactly at the North Pole, you would be standing on a moving sheet of frozen seawater, floating directly over a pitch-black ocean basin that plunges more than 4 kilometers deep. Let yourself sink into the unique physics and quiet beauty of this floating kingdom. Because the Arctic is an ocean rather than a continent, its ice behaves in a completely different way than the ancient heavy ice sheets of the South. This is the world of sea ice. Sea ice does not form from centuries of compressed snowfall. Instead, it grows directly from the freezing of the ocean's saltwater surface. This process is a beautiful miracle of nature. When the Arctic autumn arrives and the sun sinks below the horizon for months at a time, the air temperature drops far below freezing. The surface of the sea begins to cool. When seawater reaches minus 1.8 degrees Celsius, tiny, microscopic ice crystals called frazzle ice begin to form in the water column. They look like tiny needles of pure crystal floating in the dark waves. As the wind gently moves the water, these needles bump into one another, fusing together to form small, round structures known as pancake ice. These frozen pancakes float on the surface, their edges rounded and raised from constantly nudging against each other in the gentle currents. Eventually, as the cold deepens, the pancakes freeze together completely, locking the ocean surface into a solid, continuous sheet of ice known as pack ice. Unlike the barren interior of Antarctica, this floating ice sheet is a thriving, dynamic highway for some of the most specialized wildlife on Earth. Because the Arctic is connected to massive land masses, it is home to large land mammals that have evolved to conquer the cold. And among them, none are more majestic than the polar bear. The polar bear is scientifically classified as a marine mammal because it spends the vast majority of its life not on solid Earth, but on the shifting pack ice of the Arctic Ocean. Every single part of this creature is an evolutionary masterpiece designed to harvest energy in a frozen desert. Underneath their thick, cream-colored fur, polar bears possess skin that is completely pitch black. This black skin acts as a natural solar panel, absorbing every single ounce of warmth from the pale, low polar sun. Their fur is not actually white. Each hair is a clear, hollow tube of keratin that traps the bear's body heat inside, while reflecting light to make them blend seamlessly with the surrounding snow. As you watch the polar bear move across the ice in your mind, notice how slow and deliberate its movements are. Polar bears rarely run. Because their insulation is so incredibly efficient at trapping heat, running can cause them to dangerously overheat, even in minus 30-degree weather. They walk with a heavy, rhythmic, slow cadence stride, conserving their energy for the long hunt. The sea ice is absolutely vital for the polar bear's survival. They use the ice as a floating platform to hunt their primary source of food, ringed seals and bearded seals. The seals spend their time swimming in the rich, nutrient-dense waters beneath the ice. But because they are mammals, they must surface to breathe. They use their sharp claws to maintain tiny breathing holes through the frozen sheets. The polar bear will find one of these breathing holes and sit beside it for hours, completely still, waiting in absolute silence. This is a game of ultimate patience. The bear will close its eyes, lowering its heart rate, listening to the gentle sound of the ocean currents moving beneath its paws, waiting for the exact moment the water ripples, signaling a seal rising for air. As we move outward from the frozen center of the Arctic Ocean toward the surrounding ring of land, the ice gives way to one of the most unique biomes on Earth, the Arctic tundra. The word tundra comes from a Finnish word meaning treeless plain. It is a vast, wind-swept landscape that rings the top of the globe, covering northern Siberia, Canada, and Alaska. Out here, the ground is locked in a state known as permafrost. This means that beneath a thin layer of topsoil, the earth is frozen as solid as concrete, stretching down hundreds of meters into the crust. This frozen foundation has remained undisturbed since the height of the last ice age. Because the permafrost prevents water from draining down into the earth, the tundra summer turns the landscape into a beautiful, sprawling network of shallow wetlands, slow-moving streams, and thousands of shimmering peat bogs. Trees cannot grow here because their roots cannot pierce the frozen permafrost. Instead, the tundra is covered in a rich, soft carpet of low-lying vegetation. Ancient mosses, resilient lichens, and miniature shrubs that grow only a few centimeters tall to escape the biting polar winds. During the brief, intense Arctic summer, this treeless plain explodes with life. The sun remains in the sky for 24 hours a day, providing continuous, gentle energy to the landscape. Millions of migratory birds fly thousands of miles from the southern hemispheres to nest in the safe, insect-rich bogs of the tundra. Across these golden plains march the great herds of caribou and reindeer. They possess wide, hollow hooves that act like natural snowshoes, allowing them to walk gracefully across the soft, muddy bogs without sinking. They spend the endless summer days quietly grazing on lichens and tundra grasses, moving in a slow, ancient migratory circle that has been followed by their ancestors for millions of years. Alongside them is the muskox, a prehistoric survivor of the Ice Age. Wrapped in a thick, shaggy coat of dark brown hair that hangs almost to its hooves, the muskox looks like a living boulder moving across the tundra. When the bitter winter winds return, these calm giants do not migrate south. They gather in a tight, protective circle, facing outward to shield their young from the cold, standing as silent, unshakable guardians of the northern plains. But the beauty of the Arctic lies in its extreme sensitivity. While the landscape looks tough and unyielding, it is changing faster than almost any other environment on our planet. This is due to a geographical phenomenon known as Arctic amplification. Because the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land, it is highly sensitive to changes in global temperature. As global greenhouse gases trap more heat within the Earth's atmosphere, the overall temperature of our planet rises. In the Arctic, this warming is amplified up to 4 times faster than the rest of the world. To understand why this happens, we must look back at the beautiful balance of light and reflection. When the Arctic Ocean is covered in thick white sea ice, it acts as a protective shield. The bright white surface reflects the vast majority of the sun's heat back into space, keeping the ocean below cool and dark. But as global temperatures rise, the outer edges of the sea ice begin to melt slightly earlier in the spring and freeze slightly later in the autumn. When the white ice melts away, it exposes the dark, open water of the ocean below. While white ice reflects sunlight, dark water does the exact opposite. It absorbs it. The open ocean acts like a giant sponge, soaking up the sun's solar energy and warming the water temperature. This warmer water then melts even more surrounding ice from below, exposing even more dark ocean, which absorbs even more heat. This is a feedback loop, a continuous, compounding cycle that is reshaping the geography of the North before our very eyes. As the sea ice thins and retreats further north each summer, the entire ecosystem must adapt to a new reality. The polar bears must travel further and swim longer distances across open water to find the solid packed ice they need for hunting. The ringed seals lose the stable ice platforms they rely on to give birth and nurse their pups. Yet, even in the face of this profound transition, the Arctic remains a place of deep, enduring peace. It is an environment defined by resilience. The creatures of the North do not panic. They adapt with a quiet, instinctual wisdom that is written into their very DNA. In the deep, open channels of water between the breaking ice fields, magnificent pods of narwhals and beluga whales move with effortless grace. Beluga whales, often called the canaries of the sea, swim through the icy waters in large social families, communicating with each other in a beautiful symphony of high-pitched whistles, clicks, and chirps that echo softly through the underwater canyons. Their white skin allows them to blend perfectly with the floating ice chunks above, protecting them from predators as they navigate the shifting mazes of the northern seas. They are a reminder that change is a natural part of our planet's long history, a transition from one beautiful state of being into another. The global climate shifts are a reminder of how deeply connected we all are to these polar extremes. The cold air created at the top of the world drives the great jet stream, the high-altitude wind current that circles the northern hemisphere, dictating the weather patterns, storms, and seasons for Europe, Asia, and North America. The health of the Arctic is the health of the entire globe. As the long polar night returns to wrap the northern world in its protective blanket of darkness, the winds soften into a gentle whisper. The floating pack ice groans softly as it shifts against the currents, settling into its winter home. The tundra sleeps beneath a fresh layer of soft, powdery snow, its ancient permafrost holding the memories of the Earth safe within its frozen grasp. We have traveled to the white mountainous plateau of the southern edge of the world, and we have drifted across the floating, breathing sea ice of the extreme north. Now, as our journey nears its twilight, we look at the invisible highway that connects these two polar opposites. We look at the great global pulse of our oceans. The waters of our planet are not divided. They do not exist in isolation. Every sea, every bay, and every polar gulf is bound together into a single, massive, interconnected cardiac system known to oceanographers as the global conveyor belt, or the thermohaline circulation. The word thermohaline tells us the exact physics of how this master current works. Thermo refers to temperature, and haline refers to salinity, the saltiness of the water. Together, heat and salt dictate the density of seawater, acting as the colossal silent engine that moves the deep oceans of the world. While wind drives the shallow waves on the surface where ships sail, it is the invisible shifts in water density that drive the heavy currents of the abyss. This global system moves so slowly and with such monumental weight that it takes a single drop of water roughly 1,000 years to complete one full circuit around the globe. Let your mind slow down to match this 1,000-year rhythm. Let yourself float along the ancient path of the deep water. The journey of our single drop of water begins at the top of the world, in the cold, gray seas of the North Atlantic, just off the coast of Greenland and Iceland. Out here, the bitter Arctic winds strip the heat away from the surface water, chilling it down to the freezing point. At the same time, as we learned in our exploration of the North, the freezing of seawater to create sea ice triggers a phenomenon known as brine rejection. When water molecules freeze into a solid crystal matrix, they cannot hold onto their salt. The salt is forcefully squeezed out of the forming ice, dripping down into the surrounding liquid water below. This combination creates a hyperdense solution, water that is both intensely cold and heavily saturated with salt. Because it is much heavier and denser than the warmer, fresher water arriving from the tropics, it cannot remain on the surface. It begins to sink. Near Greenland, trillions of tons of this heavy, cold water plunge straight down into the depths of the ocean, falling through the underwater canyons until they hit the cold, muddy seafloor. Oceanographers call this process deep water formation. It acts as the primary pump of the global conveyor belt. As this water sinks to the bottom, it pulls in more warm water from the equator to take its place, creating a continuous planetary siphon. Once our drop of water reaches the ocean floor, it begins its long, dark journey southward. It becomes part of a massive deep-sea river known as the North Atlantic Deep Water. Moving at a leisurely pace of just a few centimeters per second, this deep current flows past the eastern coast of North America, crosses the equator, and travels thousands of miles through the pitch-black abyss of the South Atlantic. Down here, 3 miles below the surface waves, there is no sunlight, no wind, and no seasonality. The water moves in absolute, eternal stillness, carrying vital dissolved oxygen from the surface down into the deep trenches of the planet. After centuries of slow traveling, this deep current finally reaches the southern tip of South America and Africa, where it empties out into the vast wild ring of the Southern Ocean surrounding Antarctica. Out here, with no continental landmasses to block the path, the water is caught up in the Antarctic circumpolar current, the strongest, most massive current on Earth. This current loops continuously from west to east around the frozen continent, acting as a grand central station for the global oceans. As our drop of water circles Antarctica, it is recharged by an even colder, heavier water mass known as the Antarctic bottom water. Formed in the icy coastal polynyas of the Weddell and Ross Seas, this is the densest, coldest water on the planet. It plunges down the Antarctic continental slope, slipping beneath the North Atlantic water and spreading out along the very bottom of the global seafloor. From this Antarctic engine room, the conveyor belt splits into 2 great branches. One branch turns sharply northward, entering the deep basin of the Indian Ocean, while the other branch pushes eastward past Australia, flowing up into the vast, deep expanse of the Pacific Ocean. As the deep water moves slowly up into the warmer climates of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, after hundreds of years in the dark, it begins to experience a slow, beautiful transformation. The intense pressure relaxes, and the water gradually mixes with the warmer, lighter layers above it. The deep current begins to rise back toward the light in a process called upwelling. Driven by the fierce winds of the open ocean, this upwelling brings centuries-old, nutrient-rich water up to the sunlit surface layers, creating a massive feast for the marine food chains, fueling the growth of microscopic algae and sustaining the great whale populations. Our drop of water, now warm and light, has returned to the surface. Caught up in the shallow, wind-driven currents of the tropics, it begins its long return journey. It flows westward through the Indonesian archipelago, crosses the Indian Ocean, rounds the southern tip of Africa, and enters the warm Gulf Stream current of the Atlantic. The Gulf Stream acts as a giant surface highway, carrying the warm, tropical heat of the equator back up toward the North Atlantic, keeping the climates of Western Europe remarkably mild and comfortable. Eventually, the warm water reaches the cold, icy air off the coast of Greenland once more. The heat is released into the atmosphere, the water cools, the salt concentrates, and the drop prepares to sink back down into the abyss for another 1,000-year cycle. This is the great breathing rhythm of our living Earth, a continuous, perfectly balanced circle where the cold of the poles and the heat of the equator trade places in a slow, eternal dance. The oceans hold the memory of the planet, regulating our climate, distribution of nutrients, and the very air we breathe. Everything is connected. The frost of the north, the ice of the south, and the warm waves of the tropics are all parts of the same beautiful, singular system. That brings our full exploration of the polar maps to a close. From the ancient ice of the South Pole to the shifting sea ice of the Arctic, thank you for coming on this journey with us. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a like, leave a comment with what location we should explore next, and subscribe for more geography documentaries. Until next time, stay curious.